Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. We are going to shift back and forth between House and Senate bills as people come in and out, and so we can move as quickly as possible. Let's see, Delegate Lewis. 12. Here. We know this bill. What makes it different?
There are a few amendments for House Bill 12 that's in a similar posture, Senate Bill 151. The amendments from the House side that were worked out as a result of conversations between advocates and the departments. The House amendments firstly put the designation of transit development sites in the hands of the subcabinet of smart growth rather than the Secretary of Transportation. These amendments also sunset the designation at 10 years with the option to renew. Right now, there's no option for sites to end their designation. This amendment simply offers an option for sites to do so. These amendments also remove mention of the community development block grant to instead refer to eligible federal grant. This was at the request of the departments. We also secured funding on the House side for $5 million annual appropriations of the fund. Thank you guys for your time and attention. Oh, for the record, Delegate Jazz Lewis.
Any questions? Okay. You have another one.
I do. The second one is House Bill 458. So this bill will bring the Interagency Commission on School Construction out of the Department of Education and will make it an independent unit of state government. This reflects the intent of the Built to Learn Act, but wasn't included in statute. This move will help us streamline the commission's work. Both the House and Senate bills also offered a number of technical changes to help in the commission's work. The House bill does have a number of amendments currently not included in the Senate bill. These particularly relate to Prince George's County's P3 agreement on school construction. These amendments clarify that any debt associated with the P3 agreement is owed by the school board, limiting any impacts this debt may have on the county's bonding authority. The House bill also raises the state's yearly contribution to the Prince George's County Public School Partnership Fund from 25 to 27 million. These amendments also shift the evaluation of using alternative energy systems in schools from being conducted by the Commission and the Maryland Stadium Authority to the local jurisdiction's Board of Education. This bill, alongside the accompanying amendments from the House, will help us streamline and improve our state's process for school construction. I urge a favorable vote.
Few questions. Very good. Is that all you have?
That's all I got.
All right.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you. I'm gonna say, delegates, just come up as you're sitting, and who's ever next to come up, just don't. Delegate Collison, good to see you.
Nice to see you, Senator. Thank you.
Yep, just keep it moving.
Keep it moving. So I'm here with House Bill 368, which you heard as Senate Bill 9 back in January. It was heavily amended in the House. Let me tell you what the amendments do. And I will say that the advocates have agreed to accept these amendments. So if you feel so inclined as well, for the record, I'm Delegate Bonnie Cullison. And the amendments actually bring us back to status quo in terms of the notification of the intent to privatize, so that it goes back to only in-state facilities. It doesn't include out-of-state facilities, which we were hoping to do in the original bill. And it requires the notification to the designated and certified representative of the employees for any privatization that will run in the within the range of $10 million or more. So it does include that notification for those significant projects. And while it's not everything we wanted, we feel like it moves the needle a little in terms of notifying our employees of when major changes are going to be happening. And we hope that you will give it a favorable report.
Great questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator.
Okay, who wants to be next? Delegate? Yeah. Come on up. 622.
Yes. Right. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and the Vice Chair, and the members of the powerful B&T Committee. I'm Delegate Lily Chi, and I'm very pleased to be here appearing in front of you for the first time. I'm here to present HB
We're nice over
622.
here, don't worry.
He's my crossfile. That's why he walked out. But you will move my.
Oh, you
right?
cross one with him?
I know, that's right.
They have
Yeah.
judgment issues. Okay.
That's why I'm here. The Industry 4.0 grant program, AKA Make It in Maryland bill, which passed the House with overwhelming strong bipartisan support and passed unanimously out of the Ways and Means Committee. Because as the pandemic showed us, beefing up domestic production is not just an economic imperative, but increasingly a national security one as well. You have heard this bill from Senator Rosapep, so I'll be brief. This bill essentially establishes a matching grant program in the Department of Commerce for small and medium-sized manufacturers to help them adopt the new technologies to stay competitive. So why is this bill needed? Because one of the greatest challenges for our manufacturers is to keep up with the new generations of technologies that can be a huge investment they often cannot afford on their own. But if they don't keep up, then they will go under or get acquired by out-of-state bigger guys, and then you will never see them again in our communities. So this bill is based on the policies in other competing states in advanced manufacturing, like Massachusetts, Colorado, Iowa, and Indiana. It's a top recommendation of the Make It in Maryland work group that Senator Rosapep and I both served on as a result of the bill we passed 2 years ago called Transforming Manufacturing in the Digital Economy. And this is the report that you should have in your packet. You might be surprised to learn, as we did, that even though Maryland has a proud history in manufacturing and is still home to some of the great global brands like McCormick and Under Armour, we are only half of the national average in our density of manufacturing jobs. In other words, we are punching below our weight and we have tremendous room for growth. As an asset-rich state, Maryland is really well positioned to leverage this new wave of a reshoring movement and reclaim our leadership as an exporter state to other states and other countries. In case you wonder how this program works, the Department of Commerce already has a pilot in place that is going very well. In fact, the department adopted our work group's idea last year and started a $1 million pilot program, and the 57 companies jumped on that. There was a huge demand. As a result, 24 companies actually received the matching grant. So this bill would essentially codify this successful program and expand upon that. If we agree manufacturing is important, as I'm sure all of us do, then let's be intentional and help our makers succeed. I am urging this committee to not only move this bill out of the committee, but consider adding more funding to it, because our competing states are funding such a program to the tune of tens of millions. And I wish you could hear the compelling stories from our manufacturers that testified at the Ways and Means Committee. These companies are doing exactly what we expect them to do, paying good wages well above the average and hiring Marylanders from college graduates to formerly incarcerated. So this program can be a game changer for our manufacturing economy, and I urge you a favorable report. Thank you so much.
Questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have another delegate ready to jump up. Anybody? Corbin? I think I did see Delegate Corman jump in. Yep, he came in first.
So nice.
So nice, yeah.
They are.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chair, committee members. For the record, I'm Delegate Jessica Feldmark here to present House Bill 897. You've heard the cross file of this, Senate Bill 826. Both this committee and the Senate passed it unanimously, so thank you. I do just want to highlight that the House bill is amended slightly. Basically, clarifying the process for the renewal applications. This is for the homeowner's property tax credit to make it easier for folks living on fixed income only from Social Security, annuity, or pension, so that they can do an easy renewal and only have to do the full application every 3 years. So the amendments simply specify what they need to, the criteria that they need to certify as part of that renewal process. And I'd ask for your favorable report. Happy
Great.
to answer any questions.
Questions, anybody? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Corman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. I come for you with HB 448, which is the Teacher Pay Parity Act. This is the cross file of Senator Zucker's bill on what we incorrectly call non-public placement schools. These are schools that have 90, 95%, 100% of their kids, in the case of the Benedictine School on the Eastern Shore, actually funded through the public school system. These are kids on IEPs who are being funded that way. I know you've heard a lot about this over the past few years from Senator Zucker, so I'll just say, we have a 3-year phase-in on the House side bill. We made a few other process changes that I know Senator Zucker's taken a close look at because they might need some further work from you all. But the general idea is to try to put the teachers who are teaching public school kids at one school on parity with teachers who are teaching public school kids at another school. And that's what the purpose of the bill is. And I hope it'll receive a favorable report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Delegate. Any questions? Thank you very much. 457. Delegate Embry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, and committee members. Thank you. I'm here on behalf of House Bill 457. The cross file is Senator West, Senate Bill 65. I want to start by saying this is a bill that not only doesn't cost money, but in fact potentially could save local revenue. The purpose is to clarify language in the recordation tax bill, clarifying the purchase money mortgage exemption, which was designed to prevent double payment for a recordation of a deed and the recordation of a combined purchase money mortgage, which is the deed plus, or the purchase amount plus the construction loan, to avoid the exemption from being used to exempt the entire mortgage. The reason that it matters, because there is, as I'm sure you know, and I'm sure Senator West talked about, there is Attorney General advice language, both from 1939 and then later and reiterated in 1996, advice language that says the exemption is limited, but there have been attempts recently in Baltimore City, at least, based on the openness and lack of clarity in the language, to exempt full construction mortgages in these situations. There's currently a case on appeal, or excuse me, not on appeal, a refund sought in tax court that will be appealed. And if successful, the lawyer intends to solicit clients and seek the refunds for other people who have paid the full correct mortgage. So with that, I will stop. I urge a favorable report, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
261. Anybody here for the delegate? Okay. You have the cross? Go ahead, do it. You know the difference? Why don't you do that while we move on to Senate Bill 879?
There he is.
Oh, okay, got him. Come on down.
Hi, good afternoon.
Hey.
Delegate Ken Kerr. I am here to present House Bill 261, Public Projects Procurement of Construction Materials, the Buy Clean Maryland Act. This is the cross file to Senator Elfreth's Senate Bill 424 that this committee heard back in February. It involves requiring the Department of General Services, beginning in 2025, to consider the carbon footprint of materials used in construction. This bill is limited to concrete. And
What's the difference between Senator Alford's bill?
At this point, there's an amendment in the House that changes it, that removes a provision that required a study. And I think Senator Elfreth has an amendment to conform to the House bill.
Senator
Sure.
Alford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Delegate, there's also a small grant program as well in the House version of the bill?
I didn't realize that wasn't in yours
Oh,
as
no,
well.
it's only in your bill.
Okay, there's a grant provision to provide technology grants to like the ready mix companies who will receive the cement that is that's created using 30% less carbon. So it's a grant program to let them buy the technology they need to accept the cement in order to make the concrete.
Very good. Questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Actually, I see Senator Young is here, so we're going to go to 9:53.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present a delegation bill that was voted out unanimously. This bill with the amendments is the exact same bill that this committee voted out last year at this time, sponsored by my predecessor from District 3. Basically, what this bill does is authorize a tip jar in Frederick County to operate as an electronic tip jar if the organization obtains a gaming permit from the county. These tip jars benefit fraternal organizations, civic, veterans, other charitable events, and the advantage in the electronic versus the manual is it frees up employees' time who would not have to deliver the tickets.
Okay, very good. Questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Senator Rosenthal.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee. The good news is I'm not pushing real hard to pass the bill this year. So don't get freaked out this late in the session. But what I introduced this bill to get the conversation started and get people thinking along these lines. Big picture, you'd be stunned to know this deals with workforce and jobs and apprenticeships. Over the last several years, we've done a lot of things. The federal government's done a lot of things, state government's done a lot of things. In fact, counties have done a lot of things. And the Kerwin blueprint does a lot of things. And one of the things they're all doing is trying to strengthen the role of our local workforce boards in our communities in helping people get trained, find jobs, upskill, join apprenticeships. So what this bill tries to do is say, let's have a vision for the future for workforce boards. Historically, our workforce boards have been primarily funded with federal money that is very narrowly targeted to people with particular barriers to employment. But that is changing. Some counties put in their own money to allow broader support for people looking for jobs and people looking for training. The federal government has increasingly put money into apprenticeships, as we have in Maryland. The blueprint for Maryland's future makes the local workforce boards the agencies to do career counseling for our middle schools and high school students and puts money there. And 2 years ago, when we had the ARPA money, we put aside $75 million to go out to the workforce boards on a formula basis, but then be able to expand what they were doing with people who did not qualify under the limitations of the federal workforce programs. So the idea here is to basically pull all that together, put in a funding system from the state and the counties for when the ARPA money is no longer available, which will be in FY26. And so there are a lot of complicated fiscal pieces of this and a lot of complicated, you got to do this and you got to do that, which I'm happy to bore the committee with if you want to get into that. But that's the point of the bill. And I've spent a lot of time, and the reason it's late, I spent a lot of time with the workforce boards, with the Department of Labor, with other people to try to come up with and the staff here, DLS staff has actually been very helpful in trying to figure out how to do this. But fundamentally, it says that starting in 26, there would be a state grant program that would have to be matched by interested counties if they met these criteria for providing robust job services for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Brandon Butler with Pinnacle Strategies on behalf of our client, the Maryland Workforce Association. We represent, it's an association of the 13 local workforce development boards. We want to thank Senator Rosapep for his thoughts and for including us in the discussion on this bill. What this bill does in a number of things, as the senator said, is it clarifies some of the pieces of blueprint, particularly as it relates to career counseling. Right now, career counseling is an opportunity for local workforce boards to reach into our middle schools and high schools and to open up the world of work to them. And so it is a great opportunity. Unfortunately, the funding is for the next 3 years. What this bill does is it makes that funding stream indefinitely. So for as long as we have blueprint, this provides that funding to the local workforce boards. I hope you've engaged with your local workforce boards. If you haven't, we will be glad to set that up for you, particularly during the interim, because they do a lot of great work. But unfortunately, as the senator pointed out, WIOA, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, the federal funds that flow to the state from U.S. Department of Labor are restrictive, and it really only limits it to for folks that have multiple barriers to employment, whether that's homelessness, whether that's transportation issues, childcare issues, very, very important things. But unfortunately, it does limit the universe in which these workforce boards can utilize federal funding to get people back to work. And so we appreciate the senator again and would be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions? Is there anyone else here in person? There were several other folks
Not that I
that were
see.
signed up. Okay, then I have someone, Brianna, January on virtual.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, esteemed committee members. For the record, Brianna January with the Maryland Association of Counties in strong support of SB 879. As always, committee, you have my written testimony, so I'll be brief. Counties thank the Vice Chair for introducing this bill, which is complementary to the work that counties are already doing around career readiness and workforce development. And as Mr. Butler noted, SB 879 clarifies any confusion around which institutions are to receive and manage dedicated career counseling funds and corresponding programs under the blueprint. Counties agree that workforce development boards are the best to do so. And with that, we strongly support SB 879 and urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Very good questions. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
So we're going to take up 920 now. This is Senator McCrae's bill. He's over in Ways and Means testifying, and he has suggested that his witness could go forward and present what this is all about. Brianna?
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the Budget and Tax.
Yes.
Someone says she signed up in opposition.
Oh, I apologize. Sorry.
Sorry, man.
Very sorry.
That's all right. Thank you, senators, for having me here. I'm Deborah Mercado from Maryland Right to Life. And represent all of our followers across the state. Do want to say that I think the intentions of this bill are very good to create job opportunities for people. But what we oppose at this bill could be exploited for the abortion industry. As you know, the Abortion Care Access Act passed last session removed the physician requirement for performing abortions and created abortion care clinical training programs with a protected 3.5 million training program fund. That law, due to the lack of any medical background as a requirement, has opened the door for any number of apprenticeships or training programs to be used for abortion purposes. Without a stated prohibition, this bill would allow the career counseling program with its registered apprenticeship sponsors to be used to recruit participants for the abortion industry workforce. And you'll see that like on page 2 and other references to the career counseling. And in context of all the other pieces of legislation that have been passed that do involve apprenticeships and training programs, we just would not want to see the abortion industry exploit any of these well-intentioned bills to provide jobs to be used for abortion purposes. We have the Apprenticeship Commission, the Vocational Exploration Act, the Maryland Pathway to Nursing Program, even the inmates labor job training and educational courses, and more opportunities for career-focused students. All of these bills have apprenticeship programs. And now that there's no longer a doctor required for abortion services and just a qualified provider who is licensed or certified by the state of Maryland, all of these programs could be exploited by the abortion industry. We would like to ask you to add an amendment to exclude the bill being used for abortion purposes. And that way, I think the intentions of these bills would be better served so that you can focus on other vocational opportunities. So we do oppose 79 without an amendment.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you very much. And again, I'm sorry for missing you there.
That's all right. Thank you. And have a good evening.
You too. Okay, now I think we can get to Senate Bill 920. Mr. Bariano.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the Budget and Taxation Committee. For the record, Bruce Bariano, I'm speaking on behalf of Senator Corey McCray, who I thank very much for introducing this legislation on behalf of my client, ACE. ACE is an alliance of specialty union and some non-union, but predominantly union specialty contractors. This bill is on retention proceeds. I know you've had this issue before you in the past. Legislation several years ago was passed just like this, applying in the private sector. This bill applies to state contracts and state work. And it's a very serious and important matter. As you know, a lot of subcontractors really pretty much pay for the construction job. They got to pay the workers, materials and what have you, and rely on the general to then ultimately get the money. And there are problems, and cash flow is how you continue in your business and keep your employees and the realities of doing construction work. The importance of this bill, to point out, please, is on page 2 in line 21, we're talking about undisputed retention. That is monies for stuff that is absolutely done on the construction job that is undisputed. That should be released to the subcontractor and not held till the end of the job. If it's undisputed, pay the person. I think all of us can relate to our own personal circumstances in that regard. And it would have to be paid within 90 days. But I know last year the Department of General Services, under a previous administration, opposed this bill, and they pretty much kept all the money until the job was over. Now we're talking about this bill only applies to those contractors doing state work that are already bonded. I mean, they're bonded, so there is a security that the state already has. I would just say in conclusion, just being very candid with the committee, this bill's over in the House. I've communicated with Delegate Pena-Melnick, the chair there, and that the issue of procurement is new to that committee. There are a couple of bills dealing in this subject area. And on the House side, I'm just trying to be candid, Mr. Chairman. They're going to put a work group together and study this over the summer, which is unfortunate, but yet it's good in the long run because knowledge and understanding and really getting something together is very, very important. So I know it's late in the session. I know this committee has really started to get into procurement, and we're all very excited about that. If for some reason you don't feel the timing and other reasons it's appropriate, I would respectfully suggest maybe some collaboration with the House HGO committee, in that regard. And I'll just say finally, I know well, and I've done some things with the new Secretary of General Services, and I think there'll be a lot of cooperation there. I just think he's very open to discussion and really working out problems. And I thank you very much. Thank the committee very much. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions? Thank you very much.
Good to see you all. Thank you. Have a good day.
All right, that concludes our hearing for today. We're going to vote in a minute. We need, how long? We need 10 minutes?
I don't know where.
We need 10, so we'll get started in quarter of. Okay, everybody. Let's get going. And then we're all very excited that Mr. Smolsky's here. I know we live for that.
It's my second favorite committee.
Okay, so we're gonna take up the cannabis bill. We're second on that. Did everybody get one of these?
They should, yes.
Okay, everybody have one of these B&T subject matter papers at their desk. Excellent. We're gonna try to stay focused. Obviously, Mr. Smolsky, if you want to give a quick overview, very, very quick of sort of big picture. And then we'll focus in on the things that matter to our subject matter.
Okay, so Senate Bill 516 is a bill that basically establishes a regulatory framework under which licensed legal cannabis businesses in the state will be operating. There are several licenses that will be issued by the state to be a legal business in the state. First off, the bill as it was introduced established this under the Alcohol and Tobacco Commission. The amendments in front of you alter that and are going to change that the main regulatory entity in the state is going to be the Maryland Cannabis Administration, separate and distinct from the Alcohol and Tobacco and Cannabis Commission. There'll be an advisory body and the bill established an Office of Social Equity. That's also going to be located within the commission, not under the administration. So that's the entity that's going to be doing the regulation. It establishes a licensing framework. There's going to be licensing similar to medical cannabis for growers, processors, and dispensaries. But the bill also adds additional licenses for micro growers, micro processors, and micro dispensaries. There's also agents and various other folks involved with the industry who will either be registrants or licensed also. That's a quick overview of what the bill does. There's a lot of detail in here and how this is all going to occur. I will mention that the current to get I won't say product, to get cannabis sold in retail as soon as possible, rather than just starting a whole licensing process from scratch. The bill requires all existing medical cannabis licensees to convert. If you do not convert and pay the fee to convert, then you will no longer be able to operate as a cannabis businesses, and you can either sell it and then the conditions will apply to the buyer. But all existing cannabis licensees are going to be required to convert and pay a fee for that. And I'll mention that fee briefly in a minute. So that means that if this bill passes, it's an emergency bill, that as soon as possible, you'll be able to have on starting July 1st, as under the constitutional amendment last year, cannabis will be legally purchased in the state up to the amount specified in a bill last year that you also were second on, which is 1.5 grams. So in terms of the items of interest to this committee, Philip put together a very helpful sheet. And this is going by the reprint. So if you want to follow along in the reprint, otherwise I'll just summarize what you have here. There is a program established in the bill. This is a social equity grant, our partnership grant program. The purpose of this program is to allow existing cannabis licensees to be mentors to upcoming social equity applicants. These folks are going to have problems getting started in the business because there's not a lot of capital out there, and you're limited by the fact that you can only use Maryland banks. So the existing licensees will be able to partner with cannabis startups, and they'll receive so much money for this purpose. So that's what the $5 million mandated, or it's a $5 million mandated appropriation beginning in 2025 to allow established cannabis licensees to mentor social equity licensees. Also consistent with, we're not going well, we'll get to that later. There's also a prohibition added by the Finance Committee. It was also added in the House bill that said there can be no local taxes on cannabis. You'll see that on page 49. And beginning on page 81 in the bill, this is where the Finance Committee has a suggestion for the Budget and Tax Committee to limit or to set taxation on retail sale only of cannabis. There's no excise tax, there's no taxes anywhere else along the line. And again, the purpose of just having a straight sales tax of 9%, which is equivalent to the alcohol tax, is to make it easier to get this program up and running without having to come up with a very complicated tax structure. So all retail sales of cannabis, adult use cannabis, not medical cannabis, will be subject to a 9% sales tax, and each dispensary has to keep separate products in their dispensary for what's medical and what's commercial cannabis, for lack of a better word. And then on page 80, you'll
So
see
on that subject matter, why don't you tell us what discussion occurred in the committee about the magic of 9%? I mean, obviously the alcohol tax is a significant factor, the ease of collection and record keeping, all that good. But then there was there's been a lot of discussion about the black market and how a tax rate may apply or have significance to that.
the bill was introduced, had a lower tax rate. And that was what was done by, the House didn't make any changes to that. It was a graduated increase. So next year, the tax rate would have been 5 or 6%, and it would have increased 1% every year to 9% max. And there was some discussion in the Finance Committee about going higher than that. There was no amendment offered in the committee, but there certainly was some discussion about possibly having a higher tax rate, but they settled on 9%, like as the chair indicated, because it's the alcohol tax. You were going to get to 9% anyway. What is the effect on the black market? It's undetermined. This would put Maryland in still one of the lower tax rates in the nation regarding that. The thinking is that the black market is still going to be there, at least initially, till you get a mature market. Once things get built up, then hopefully folks will start going to these legal dispensaries to buy their cannabis rather than off the black market. But it was a compromise number that you were going to get the 9% in 3 or 4 years anyway. Why not do it right now? And it would also just bring in a little bit more money for the general fund and for the program specified funded that would be funded by these revenues.
Do we have estimates on what that will generate?
I think Philip has the numbers.
So in the fiscal note for the House bill, there's estimates, exhibit 4. And so in that, there's estimated annual sales. So the rough math on that would be just instead of using the graduated rates in the House bill, you would just use 9% against all those amounts. So in fiscal 24, the assumption was about 400 million in sales. Fiscal 25, a little more than 800.
This is under 9%.
No, this is the estimated sales.
Yeah.
So based on the assumed estimated sales for fiscal 24 through 27 at 9% sales tax, fiscal 24 would be about 36 million. 25 will be 73.1, 2026, 111.8. And then 2027 would be the same assumption in the fiscal note for the House bill, 146.6. Now, again, there's potential, those are estimates, as Dave was saying, and to the chair's question about the black market in terms of sales and maturing the program, those are unknowns, but based on the numbers of assumed sales in the next 4 fiscal years, those are the amounts under a 9% sales tax.
And these numbers, I believe, are based on experiences of other states, similar size states.
Senator King.
I'm just wanted to ask a question about, it says on here the no local taxes on cannabis. So in order for a local county to charge a tax, they'd have to come back to us to do that, correct?
Yes, that is
I
correct.
just can't imagine they're not going to be asking for that. I'm just saying.
And just clarifying on that too, the language, it's local jurisdictions or special taxing districts. So it should cover all the potential.
Senator Rosebeth.
Yeah, I know very little about this market. But I've heard that in other states that have legalized it, they still have a huge black market. So help me understand big picture, what the theory is behind why legalizing this way is really going to cut in materially to the black market.
It's hard to, legalizing the theory of legalization is something that you as policymakers are contending with right now. The purpose is that if there is a black market and there's adequate demand for this product, then the state would legalize it, and also through some sort of tax structure also get some of the revenues that are or some of the money that's being spent on cannabis. When you legalize it, you get a safer product. It's all going to be lab tested. You don't know what you're getting when you go to the black market. You don't know where the cannabis is coming from, how it's got here. But at least if you legalize it, the consumer would have some knowledge, because of the way the bill is structured, that you would have a much safer product. You would know what the potency is going to be, because that'll be limited by the administration. So it'll be a better quality product.
Did the committee have data or discussion about why the black market seems to be going strong in places that have legalized it?
No, we did not. We did not address that. And we didn't have much discussion on that matter.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you for being here. Question on the distribution, the set of cost and operations. At the beginning of session, we discussed Alcohol Tobacco Commission stepping in on the enforcement side. The bill is amended here. I'm guessing changes that assumption. Can you just explain that? And then how many officers are included in this 10 to 11 million a year?
Well, that I don't know the details of that. I know there's by separating it out, there's going to be some adjustments, and I think the administration is working on that right now, because they're aware that the recommendation is going to be for an administration, not just putting more under the commission.
Okay.
So my understanding is they're working on how this will be be adjusted, and what changes are going to be necessary, and what budget amendments are going to have to come in over the course of the rest of the fiscal year. I don't think they're going to get, I'm not sure they're going to get to it right now, but they're already making plans to make this adjustment, and how many people they're going to need to enforce most of the enforcement was going to be by this office anyway.
Okay.
So you're going to have to beef up, whether they were a division as part of the commission or whether they're separate. Most of the enforcement, at least of cannabis, was going to be left to this group.
I believe Alcohol Tobacco Commission had cited 13 new enforcement officers when we just discussed the possibility of this being over there. And I'm just curious if that's the same number over here, or if it's going to require extra support staff because it's a new division not included in.
When this bill crosses, you'll have a revised fiscal note, which I'm assuming will have all that altered information in there if this bill crosses in this form.
Okay. And I just want to speak for colleague to the left who's not here right now, but just concerns over if we're going to have Mr. Smolsky, it's up to 300 dispensaries.
Mm-hmm.
It's at 120 right now.
You have about 110 right now or
110.
so, but it'll go up to 300 statewide.
Statewide.
And I was going to specifically mention, now that your colleague is here, about one of the amendments in the bill in response to some concerns of Senator McCray, which the committee adopted, which has to deal with the saturation of dispensaries.
Thank you. I'm curious if you could speak a little bit about that. I know it's not really in our purview, but I think it's important to understand that it's going to be spread out and not.
Do you want to do that
concentrated.
now, or do you want to wait till okay. That is on page, the actual language is on page 55 of the reprint. So if you want to go there, you'll see this is what we nicknamed anti-clumping. And this is based on what some other states have done. So it wasn't developed in a vacuum. So other states have come up with similar anti-clumping restrictions, and basically a cannabis dispensary may not be located within 500 feet of a school, any type of school, playground, licensed child care center. And they also cannot be located with 1,000 feet of each other. This is in recognition of some places where, you're just going to have that kind of density. Any existing licensed cannabis dispensary that converted over would not be subject to these requirements if they are located under local zoning and they were legally where they are. So they would not be affected by this, but going forward, these restrictions would apply, subject to local zoning also. Again, the local zoning, they have to treat these businesses no different than any other business. If they try to go beyond it simply because they're a cannabis business, that activity will be, is not allowed by the bill. So local localities still can have certain zoning requirements on where these businesses can located. Then they would also be subject to this stipulation that you couldn't have a dispensary within 1,000 feet of another dispensary or within 500 feet of churches, childcare centers, and playgrounds. Okay. All right. So the committee recommended a 9% tax going forward, beginning this fiscal, the start of this fiscal year. There's also specifications in the bill where some of this money is going to go. Several funds were established last year in the bill that passed that started the process towards legalization of cannabis. There was three of the funds established last session were the Community Reinvestment and Repair Fund, a Cannabis Public Health Fund, and a Cannabis Business Assistance Fund. The Community Reinvestment and Repair Fund is designed to provide funds to jurisdictions disproportionately affected by enforcement of marijuana laws. The Finance Committee recommends taking that amount up 5% to 35% rather than 30%. And the House sent over, in the House bill that came over, they gave 1.5% to the local jurisdictions and 1.5% to the Cannabis Public Health Fund. Finance Committee is recommending that amount come up to 5% to the counties, only to the counties. And then based on a revenue collected, a county may decide to share their funds they receive with a municipality in the jurisdiction if they happen to have a dispensary located in that municipality. And there's a 5% for the public health fund, and then an additional 5% is given to the Cannabis Business Assistance Fund, and this fund is there to provide loans to social equity folks who meet certain criteria so they can get up and running to be a part of the cannabis industry.
So to that point, what distinguishes that number 5 from the 5 million a year for the Social Equity Partnership Grant Program? And could you also distinguish, we put, I don't remember if it was 30 or 40 million in the budget this year for a similar purpose?
Well, this would be the money that comes from the revenues that are going to start coming in once you start, taxing cannabis. So whatever was in the budget that for, I think that was for the a business assistance fund. Those folks can get started right now. And there's also a series of people who had licensees who got licenses as a result of what we just called them the HB2 licensees who came in 2018 as a result of the problems with the original round of licenses. A lot of those folks who got licenses still aren't up and running yet, and that happened because they got their licenses right before the pandemic.
That was part of another, I think, 30 or 40 million from last year that was in that 69 million that was fenced off, that was released by the governor at the beginning of this year. And I think that was for that portion. But then we put another portion in. I guess I'm just curious if that money that we put in the budget this year falls into one of these spots.
I don't know what was actually put in the budget. These assessment, once this bill becomes law and you start, this is the ongoing funding stream for monies that will be going into these funds going forward. You won't need to have a separate budget allocation. So I believe that's the intent here.
No, I think I agree with you. I think it's absolutely right. I'm just curious how that money, where it goes exactly in the context of, does it go to the same kinds of funds or is it a different separate thing all of its own? If that was something that was determined, I guess it wasn't discussed in the committee.
No, you're just establishing the framework for how things are going to move once we have legal sales of cannabis in the state going forward. So what you're deciding right now in the budget, I'm not as familiar with.
Senator Solly?
You, I see the percentages and I'm just wondering, was there a conversation at all about any of this going to education?
I think some of this money will end up there eventually. If you go to the whole use allocations of the fund, I'm not entirely certain. I mean, what the finance committee was most concerned about was the monies that were going to be allocated to these funds that were established last year in the legislation. But there's additional allocations. Okay, the balance goes to the general fund, and then if you go to the top of 80, you'll see that there's money taken off the front and for regulation. I guess nothing here is directly tied to the blueprint or anything like that, but that's not really within my area of how these things are going to flow. But the whole allocation scheme is identified actually beginning on page 70, at the bottom of page 79.
Yeah, I was reading through that coming across the page 80. I was just wondering, I mean, we always talk about blueprint and how we can enhance that because we're going to be needing funds down the road. And I'm thinking this is a possibility in an area where we could probably do something like that, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, so this is a good time to mention something, sort of the number of interests that have come to me and others who have asked for a piece of this pie. And the blueprint is a great one. Matter of fact, everyone I heard was a pretty good idea. The question is, you know, where do we draw the line and how do we deal with all of those requests? Matter of fact, just shortly before we started this meeting, I had 2 requests come directly to me from very worthwhile causes. The blueprint, the good news, I think, for us and as for the budget committee is that 50% of this is going to go to the general fund, which in turn will help us manage the overall costs of the budget, which will allow us ultimately to ensure that the blueprint is fully funded in the long term, even though it's not dedicated for that purpose in this bill. The other causes, as I said, I just off the top of my head, I can think of 3 or 4 of them that were very worthwhile. But I'm going to suggest that we stick with this distribution, in part because we're sort of at the end of this process, and those kinds of decisions have been worked through. They are both budgetary and policy oriented when you think about that, where and how monies are spent. But it's a legitimate question, a good question, and but I'm certainly comfortable with the way it is right now, even though I do think there's some good stuff out there that could be done.
Okay, continuing on with the sheet in front of you. There was also, and consistent with medical cannabis from years past, there is no sales or use tax on medical cannabis. So that will continue. And there was also some changes made to and again, this is well out of my, in the finance committee's area of expertise, but there was language added by the House that specified that the head of the Alcohol and Tobacco Commission, the executive director, doesn't necessarily have to be a sworn police officer. And if that is the case, there's changes to the pension law to allow for a non-sworn police officer to be executive director of the alcohol. If that's how I understand that to be. Philip can correct me if I'm.
Yeah, there was legislation in recent years dealing with an issue around the pension benefits for the executive director position. This clarifies it because the current law limited it to somebody with law enforcement powers. And since the bill is not restrictive in that sense, the pension piece is just cleaning up so that whoever's in the position is going to the right benefit tier.
And there's one other thing I wanted to mention.
That's at the end of the bill,
Oh.
page, if you go to page 84 of your reprint, it'll be all the way at the bottom. It's the non-lined portion, spills over to the following page.
Oops.
So if they have law enforcement powers, they'd be a member of LEOPS. If they don't have law enforcement powers, they'd be a member of the employees pension system.
And there's one other thing I was asked to possibly mention to you. You're the Budget and Tax Committee, and fees are always important. So there was and the fees I'm going to mention will eventually end up into this fund, and they'll go towards the regulation and whatever other purposes that are going to be in this bill. As I mentioned, the existing cannabis licensees were going to be required to convert whether they wanted to or not, and they had to pay a fee. The bill came in with a broad range of fees broken up by processor and processor, grower, and dispenser. The committee simplified that a lot. The Finance Committee simplified that a lot, and you'll see that on page 41 about the fees. And instead of having this large subset of way you could pay fees, it simply says that the lowest fee any one of these licensees can pay is going to be $100,000. The max any one of these converted licensees have to pay is going to be $2 million. And anywhere in between is going to be 10% of gross revenues. And this will apply to all three groups. And the bill was introduced that had them broken out. Dispensers had this set over here, and processors and growers had this set over here. It's all going to be combined into one. And the same fee schedule will apply to all three groups. Also, if there's a timing issue and your renewal fees are under existing law coincide with these conversion fees, those renewal fees will be counted against. If you pay your renewal fee, you'll be accounted against the conversion fees under the bill. Also, the committee sets specified limits for ongoing licensure, which are also located in the bill, and it limits licensing and renewal fees to the lesser of 10% of gross revenues or $50,000, and social equity licensees are going to be charged 50% to less of that.
So this is the same for both a conversion and annual renewal?
No, the annual renewal is going to be slightly different. That's handled in some other language. The problem with the committee heard a lot of issues regarding the one-time conversion fees.
Yep.
And so the committee addressed that by simply saying they can't be less than 100,000.
Up to 2 million.
Up to 2 million, and then between 10% of gross revenues. The House added language allowing this to be paid off in installments. That's maintained. That's still in here. So the House said that you can pay this amount in installments over 18 months. So that is still in there also. So the idea was to lessen the burden on all the folks who have to convert.
And there's an annual renewal fee also?
Well, like with anything else, if you have a license from the state, you have to pay renewal fees. They're specified through regulation, but there's limits placed in the bill on what those renewal fees and initial licensure.
So they're going to be determined by regulation, but they're within some.
Yeah, with some parameters set by the General Assembly. Which is usually the case.
Senator McCray.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think a couple of the conversations that I'm about to discuss may have went past us thus far. You referenced a couple of the groups that had come to you about being inside of the bill. And I guess the question would be, was legal aid discussed in reference to the discussion with finance? And if not, what was the posture that you were thinking about from that standpoint?
We heard a lot individually, members and myself included. I'm not a member, but as staff, we heard from legal aid repeatedly, and nobody offered an amendment to include them in as one of the people who would get money from the fund. So, but they certainly were out there.
Okay, they've hit my inbox, and I just want to get an understanding from you, Mr. Chair, what direction you would want to go with something like that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that was one of the two
It absolutely
organizations.
is one of them. It was one that I think I support greatly
Yes, sir.
and have over the years in many ways. What I was suggesting, I think maybe before you came in, was that I have heard for so many of them. My gut at the moment is to keep things in the posture that it's in, keep the bill moving, keep us going. I do not expect that would change. I think it would probably meet with sort of an increased, maybe confusion, maybe opposition. And I think this bill is a little too important that we just need to keep it in the posture that it's at.
No, I got it. Second,
As much, and I really do. Not only League Way, there were a couple others that were, I think, very worthwhile. And we're just going to have to think of ways how we handle them in the future. In other ways, the League Way certainly is one that I intend to be working on to help in the future.
yeah, nope, I felt the responsibility to kind of bring it up because
Fair
how
enough.
adamant.
No,
they
I
were.
think it's a good question.
Yeah. The second one was, I want to start by saying I'm deeply appreciative of the work and you all hearing out the concerns that I had around concentration. I did question whether percentage was ever introduced from that standpoint. Obviously, I believe that you said 300 license, 10% would be 30, 5% would be 15. Like, was there any discussion in finance in reference to, from a percentage standpoint, to make sure that we don't hit a certain threshold?
That would be left to the newly created administration to determine how those licenses would be distributed across the state. So no, the committee did not address that. As the commission gets their applications, they make those determinations when the licenses are awarded.
Okay, thank you. That's my questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Senator Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Always great to see you. Quick question for you, maybe two. So Medco is going to be responsible for an incubator.
Yes.
Component. So where social equity applicants is there a restriction on who can receive the training or who could become a part of the incubator process?
Not that I'm aware of. And there were some, I should let you know that there's some amendments regarding that would came from the administration about the incubator. It authorizes Medco to search out a site and develop an incubator spot, but it also would have required Medco to actually own it and operate it. And Medco said that's not really what they do. So amendments from the administration changed that once they site this out, get the thing going, it would be turned over to DGS to operate the incubator space. But no, other than that, the idea is designed to get folks into these places who can, like any other incubator, just get familiar with the business, gives them space to start up doing, getting involved with the business. So other than that, there's not many restrictions other than you have to meet their criteria for social equity applicant.
Got you. And if I might, Mr. Chairman. So for the social equity applicant, does the bill speak to, I know that we've all received emails over during this legislative session. Once the bill passed out of the House, I received a couple emails. And social equity applicant should have resided at least 10 of the last 20 years in a community. Could you speak to that or the residency requirement?
That was something that was in the bill was introduced, and I'm not sure. If you look into definitions, that's where what defines how you would be determined to be a social equity applicant. It's a defined term. Page 22. I had Senator Kramer help me out a lot with the amendments in the Finance Committee. So those are the definitions for social equity applicant.
Okay.
This entity, yes. So it's all right there. The House made changes there. This is House language. The Senate or Finance Committee didn't feel any reason to alter that criteria.
Okay.
So,
all right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Other questions? Yes, Senator.
Chairman, can you just walk me through these funds? So there is this social equity fund, and then there's a community reinvestment fund. And can you just, I'm trying to find it here, piece it together, but kind of who makes the decisions about that money and how it's directed?
The Community Reinvestment Fund?
Yes.
The decisions are going to be made by the Office of Social Equity. So they're established and they're going to distribute the funds to local governments based on the criteria you just mentioned, you just pointed out about various areas in the state by zip code or however that's going to be done, who have been disproportionately impacted by the enforcement of marijuana laws. It's based on arrests or some other criteria. So it's going to be left to the Office of Social Equity to make that determination. My understanding is that these areas are all over the state. So it's not going to be focused in one particular jurisdiction. And the criteria will be developed by the office as specified in the bill.
Right. So I see that. And when you say local government, who is that?
That would be the counties.
The county council, the county executive?
I don't know. I don't know how detailed Sally? It just goes to the local governments, just like all the other aid will go to local governments.
Okay. So they get that, like, and then people have to apply to them because there's also a grant fund, or is that a different pot of money?
The grant fund is for partnerships. That's for the mentoring partnerships.
No, not that one.
That's
The one that goes to local organizations. That's the one that we're talking about.
the language for the is in the back of the bill. I can't, let's see, that's the Business Assistance Fund.
No. So there's a fund that provides assistance to community organizations that then provide services to those disproportionately affected communities,
Yes,
right?
Yes,
And that's what you're talking about is the one that goes to local government?
yes, that goes to local governments. After the Office of Social Equity makes their determinations, that money will be distributed to local governments based on, the criteria that's established in the bill.
So, okay, I'm sorry, I'm a little dense here, but so the decision about the organization, who gets the money is made at the level of the social equity fund, not the local government. Is that what you're saying?
Who gets the money is determined by the Office of Social Equity based on a criteria established in the bill.
Gotcha. That's where my confusion
Okay.
is. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, so the ability to, so since we're second on the bill, what are the restrictions on any possible amendments on the bill? I understand. So. All right, thanks.
All right, 13 is my favorite number. We're all here. I know you, Senator, you didn't have the benefit of the discussion we had. But if you happen to have any questions off the top of your head, we're certainly willing to entertain that before we take a vote here. Okay, well, with that, I'll take a motion on the bill as presented from
Favorable. Second.
from the Finance Committee. Okay, all those in favor of the bill from the Finance Committee, raise your hand. And those opposed? Senator Benson? Pass, okay, that's fine. Okay. We'll move it on then, send it on to the Finance Committee. We have anything else on that? We're done.
That's it. That's finance.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Smolsky. Okay, you want to shut us down?